Picture this scenario because, well, it's probably one you were intimately familiar with. You have this massive specific task sitting right in front of you.
Right, like a huge quarterly report for work.
Yeah, or maybe it's just doing your taxes, and you know this task really matters. You can literally feel the deadline approaching. The anxiety is steadily rising in your chest.
And the logical part of your brain is just screaming at you to start.
But what do? You reach for your phone. Or, maybe you suddenly decide that right this very second is the absolute perfect time to pull out a toothbrush and, scrub the grout in your bathroom.
Which makes zero logical sense. I mean, we all know it's a terrible idea.
But we do it anyway.
Yeah.
Why is knowledge alone, just the sheer awareness that a task is important, why is that not enough to produce action?
It is arguably one of the most frustrating universal human experiences, We possess this rational understanding that delaying is going to cause us intense stress later.
Yeah.
But we actively choose the delay anyway. We essentially betray our future selves for just a few minutes of present comfort.
Well, welcome to Brain Candy from Claire and Horatio. Today we are exploring a massive stack of psychological research, health data, and behavioral studies to completely reframe how we think about avoidance.
It's a really necessary shift in perspective.
It really is. We are officially throwing out the question, why am I lazy? Because, as the research shows, laziness actually has nothing to do with it.
Right.
Instead, we're asking what feeling, friction, or reward makes avoidance easier than beginning. Because our core thesis today is that procrastination is just a mechanism to regulate immediate discomfort.
Yeah, you are transferring a psychological cost to a future version of yourself, basically because your present self cannot handle the friction.
But before we try to fix this behavior, we have to properly define what we are actually fighting against and, what we aren't.
That's vital, because procrastination is a very specific type of self-regulatory failure. We need to strictly distinguish it from things like deliberate strategic delay or genuine physical rest, or clinical burnout, depression, ADHD, or, and this is a big one, simply refusing to do pointless, unrewarding work.
Let's clarify that line, because I think people beat themselves up over things that aren't actually procrastination.
Oh, all the time.
Like, if you are exhausted from working a 60-hour week and you collapse on the couch instead of doing laundry, that is your body demanding rest.
Yeah, that's not procrastination.
Or if you delay sending an email because you're waiting for a colleague to confirm some data, that's just strategic delay. Procrastination is what the ancient Greeks called akrasia, which is acting against your own better judgment.
You know you shouldn't, but you do it anyway.
Yeah.
So to understand the mechanics of akrasia, we have to look at concepts like present bias and temporal discounting.
Okay, break that down for us.
Well, in evolutionary terms, our brains were just not designed to care about a retirement fund 30 years in the future, right? Or like a final exam 3 months away.
Because our ancestors only needed to care about immediate threats and immediate calories.
Yeah, exactly that. So temporal discounting means that the subjective value of a reward or the threat of a punishment, it decays the further away it is in time.
I see.
The logical planning part of your brain, the prefrontal cortex, it basically gets hijacked by the amygdala. And the amygdala is just looking for immediate emotional safety.
I always picture temporal discounting like a visual mirage on a long, flat desert highway.
Oh, I like that.
Yeah, so the distant consequences, like that massive final exam in 3 months, they look like tiny specks of dust on the horizon.
Right. They don't feel real.
They really don't. But the immediate low-effort rewards, like scrolling on a phone or watching one more episode of a show, they are right up in your face.
They look massive.
Yeah, they block out the entire horizon.
The mirage analogy captures that distortion perfectly. But the most crucial framework in the research we're analyzing today is emotion regulation theory.
Okay.
We really need to stop viewing procrastination as a time management flaw. It's not. It is essentially a failure in managing negative emotions.
So it's about feelings, not calendars.
Right. When you face a task, the triggers, say, anxiety, boredom, resentment, or a fear of failure, your brain interprets those feelings as a literal threat to your emotional equilibrium.
Yeah.
So you avoid the task to escape the threat. The delay offers immediate psychological relief.
And that relief becomes like a highly addictive reward.
Yeah.
You feel stressed about a blank spreadsheet, you open social media, and the stress temporarily vanishes.
Yep.
Your brain learns a very dangerous lesson, which is that avoidance works.
It does. But we also must be incredibly careful not to medicalize every single unpleasant task in life.
Fair point.
Sometimes a task is just inherently aversive.
Yeah.
Not wanting to fill out tedious expense reports doesn't mean you have a dysfunctional brain.
It just means the task is objectively tedious and boring.
Right. The problem arises when this temporary emotional band-aid becomes a chronic default habit, because the alleged long-term costs of that habit are pretty staggering.
Let's get into those alleged costs, actually, because this is where the research gets really dramatic.
It really does.
If this is just a temporary emotional escape hatch, why is it treated as a massive societal crisis?
Mm.
The sources point to a 2013 study involving over 22,000 participants.
That's a huge sample size.
Right. And it claimed that every 1-point increase on a 5-point procrastination scale correlated with an annual income loss of about $15,000.
Wow.
Now, hold on. Let me push back on this. Are you telling me if I stop scrolling on my phone right now, my boss is going to suddenly hand me a $15,000 raise?
Yeah. No.
Because that sounds like pure hustle culture nonsense designed to make people feel guilty.
Your skepticism is entirely justified there. We really need to apply intense scrutiny to dramatic dollar estimates like that one.
Okay, so what's the flaw?
That finding is based on cross-sectional correlation.
Ah.
You cannot prove causation from a snapshot in time. The relationship between procrastination and income is heavily mediated by occupational sorting and, environmental factors.
So delaying a task today does not immediately deduct funds from my bank account.
Right. It is highly likely that people in lower income, highly precarious, high-stress jobs simply experience more burnout, and that burnout manifests as task avoidance.
So it's not a fine you pay at the end of the day.
Yeah.
But the physical and mental health data paints an equally severe picture.
It does.
We have a 2023 study out of a Swedish university that followed over 3,000 students for 9 months.
Right, the longitudinal one.
Yeah. They linked chronic delay to higher levels of stress, anxiety, loneliness, and even disabling physical pain in the upper extremities, like severe shoulder and neck pain.
We also have a massive 2025 meta-analysis published in Frontiers in Psychiatry.
Oh, yeah, the depression one.
Yeah, that review aggregated 88 studies encompassing over 63,000 people across 17 countries, and the conclusion established procrastination as a clear predictor for depression.
That's incredibly heavy.
But again, we must highlight the reality of two-way causation in all of this health data.
You're talking about the classic chicken and egg problem. Does procrastination cause depression and upper body pain because you're constantly stressed? Or do chronic pain and depressive exhaustion cause a person to physically and mentally delay their tasks?
The data strongly suggests the feedback loop goes both ways. Negative emotions, physical pain, and depressive symptoms weaken your sense of self-efficacy.
So you stop believing you can actually do the thing.
Right. They drain your executive functioning, which leads directly to task avoidance. And then the stress, the looming deadlines, and the intense guilt from that avoidance, that just exacerbates the depression and the muscle tension.
It's a self-reinforcing cycle.
Yeah, it's not a simple one-way street where procrastination is this sole villain causing all your physical and mental ailments.
Well, if mental and physical health feed so heavily into our ability to take action, we really have to look outward. We have to examine our daily environment and the structural demands placed upon us.
We do.
I was looking at a recent Italian study of college students that connected procrastination habits with lifestyle factors, things like skipping breakfast, heavy alcohol use, and poor sleep.
We also have to factor in the reality of the modern digital environment, specifically smartphones.
Oh, they are everywhere.
We cannot ignore the fact that the tools we use for work are also heavily engineered escape routes.
Right.
A phone is not just a passive distraction. It is a meticulously designed delivery system for immediate dopamine rewards. So when you're faced with a threatening or meaningless task, your phone provides instant, frictionless emotional relief.
So wait, if I just eat a hearty breakfast, stop drinking, and lock my phone in a safe, does that cure the problem for good? Do I just suddenly become a perfectly productive human?
I warn strongly against turning lifestyle correlations into moral commandments.
Okay, good, because that sounds exhausting.
The Italian study we mentioned was cross-sectional. We cannot definitively say that skipping breakfast causes procrastination.
Right.
It's equally likely that a chaotic, unhelpful daily routine is simply a byproduct of broader executive fatigue. If you are overwhelmed, you skip breakfast, you sleep poorly, and you avoid your work.
It's all connected.
Yeah, and we also must acknowledge a massive structural counter-argument here that the productivity industry often just ignores entirely.
The structural realities of modern life.
Yeah.
Because sometimes the environment isn't just your phone, It's the actual demands being placed on you.
Precisely. If you are dealing with an impossible workload, heavy caregiving duties, precarious employment, or just a complete lack of autonomy at your job, your delay is not a cognitive failure.
What is it then?
It is a survival mechanism. Your nervous system is protecting you from total collapse by forcing you to stop.
We really have to reject the shame associated with procrastination while still preserving your personal agency.
That balance is key.
Yeah, you might not have the power to instantly fix an impossible workload or a toxic boss, but you can control how you relate to the avoidance it causes. You don't have to view yourself as broken.
Finding that line between environmental overload and neurobiology leads us directly to the boundary of clinical conditions.
Why?
Because structural exhaustion and executive dysfunction overlap very closely with the symptoms of clinical ADHD.
And this is where the conversation gets incredibly complex. Because if procrastination is fundamentally an executive function issue like a failure to regulate attention and emotion, where does clinical ADHD actually fit in?
It's a crucial distinction to make.
Right, because we have a 2021 randomized controlled trial in the sources showing that the stimulant medication lisdexamfetamine improved executive functioning and task initiation,
Yes.
which naturally leads to the very dangerous, tempting question. Is there a limitless style magic pill that can just cure procrastination for the average person?
I want to firmly establish the clinical boundary here. The research explores a concept called sluggish cognitive tempo, or SCT, which involves chronic daydreaming, being easily confused, mental lethargy, and severe difficulty initiating tasks.
Oh.
The 2021 trial demonstrated that lisdexamfetamine is effective for appropriately diagnosed adults with ADHD and comorbid SCT. However, there are no targeted pharmaceuticals for general non-ADHD procrastination.
So for the average person struggling with their taxes, there is no magic pill. Taking a stimulant without an ADHD diagnosis doesn't magically make you want to do the boring work, right?
Taking a stimulant without a clinical need might make you highly focused, sure, but it does not dictate what you focus on.
So you might just organize your entire garage at lightning speed while still actively avoiding your tax return.
Yeah, exactly. Unsupervised prescription stimulant use should never be encouraged. Introducing chemical stimulants to bypass normal emotional discomfort does not treat the underlying psychological avoidant patterns.
It doesn't fix the root cause.
It doesn't fix the emotion regulation loop we discussed earlier. It merely overrides your nervous system temporarily while introducing a significant risk of dependency.
Well, before we get into what behavioral interventions do work, I want to quickly mention that if you are finding this fascinating, our debate candy format tests whether procrastination is mainly a personal responsibility problem or a health and environment problem. You can check that out later.
It's a really interesting debate.
It is. But for now, if pills are not the universal answer, what behavioral interventions actually hold up in clinical trials?
We need strategies that do not rely on sheer brute force willpower.
Because, as we've established, willpower depletes quickly. Let's look at bedtime procrastination.
Oh, that's a classic one.
This is that bizarre phenomenon of delaying sleep for no apparent reason, where you just lay in the dark scrolling through videos, even though you're completely exhausted.
It is often referred to as revenge bedtime procrastination. It's a way of reclaiming autonomy in the dark after a day where you felt you had no control over your time.
That makes so much sense.
A 2020 study by Wallstein examined this specific behavior using a psychological framework called mental contrasting with implementation intentions.
That's a mouthful.
In the literature, it's often abbreviated as MCII, or sometimes WOP. The study featured 2 rigorous randomized trials and found that undergraduates who practiced daily MCII delayed their bedtime by about 38 minutes less per night compared to the control groups.
Gaining 38 minutes of extra sleep a night is a massive victory for cognitive function.
It's huge.
The MCII framework is brilliantly simple, really, because it bridges the gap between intention and action.
Walk us through it.
First, you define your desired outcome, say going to sleep by 11 p.m. Then you vividly imagine the internal obstacle stopping you, like the urge to watch one more episode of a show.
Okay.
Finally, you create an if-then plan. So, if the episode ends and the countdown to the next one starts, then I will immediately close the laptop.
The mechanism of why MCII works is vital here. It creates a preloaded decision. You are building a neural pathway in advance.
Oh, I see.
When you hit the obstacle, the trigger, you do not have to rely on depleted executive function or willpower to make a good choice in the heat of the moment.
Because you already made the choice.
Yeah. You simply execute the then part of your plan. The decision was already made when you were calm and rational.
I love that. Preloading the decision just removes all the friction.
It does.
We also have to look at how physical movement affects our ability to initiate tasks. The sources highlight a recent Chinese trial involving 77 male teenagers.
Ah, the exercise study.
Yeah, they underwent 12 weeks of strength training and high-intensity interval training, or HIIT, and the findings demonstrated significant reductions in procrastination.
Right.
But does this mean doing a bunch of burpees suddenly makes you want to write a research paper?
We must assess those exercise findings with careful skepticism. If we look closely at the trial data, the study was actually measuring sleep quality and academic grades alongside the physical training.
So it wasn't just about procrastination.
No. Labeling the study as direct evidence that exercise cures procrastination is an unverified speculative extrapolation. Exercise is not a direct anti-procrastination mechanism.
You're saying the exercise didn't specifically target the psychological habit of avoidance?
It did not. We must state what the trials actually found without overselling them as miracle cures. What the data does support is that strength training and HIA work indirectly. They significantly improve your sleep consistency, baseline energy, and self-efficacy.
Which changes everything.
It does.
Fine.
When your baseline negative affect, your general background level of stress and low mood is reduced through physical movement, your capacity to tolerate the emotional discomfort of a challenging task goes up.
Oh, wow.
You don't need to reach for the avoidant behavior because you have a larger emotional buffer.
Exercise builds the physical resilience needed to regulate your emotions. It gives your prefrontal cortex the fuel it needs to stay in charge.
Exactly.
Synthesizing all of this skepticism, the health data, and the psychological theory, we can actually build a concrete, evidence-ranked toolkit.
And just to be clear, we are not interested in a giant hustle culture productivity list of 50 things you must do before 5 a.m.
No, absolutely not. This is a specific, practical sequence you can apply to any avoided task today.
Step 1 is to name the avoided feeling or the internal obstacle. Acknowledge the emotion out loud or on paper.
So asking yourself why you're avoiding it.
Yeah. Are you avoiding the task because you fear criticism? Because it feels overwhelmingly large? Because it is tedious? Identifying the specific negative emotion strips it of its vague, overwhelming power.
You move it from the emotional center of the brain to the logical center just by labeling it.
Yes.
Step 2. Shrink the first action until it is almost embarrassingly easy.
Embarrassingly easy is the goal.
If writing a 10-page report feels like climbing a mountain, you will avoid it. Make your only task opening a blank document, typing the title, and saving the file. Make the barrier to entry so microscopic that your amygdala doesn't perceive it as a threat.
Step 3 utilizes the MCII format we discussed earlier. Create your preloaded trigger. If I feel the sudden urge to open a new browser tab while reading this report, then I will stand up, take a deep breath, and drink a glass of water instead.
You are pre-programming a healthy response to the friction.
Yeah.
Step 4 is crucial. Remove one high-reward distraction before you have to rely on willpower. Put the smartphone in another room.
Out of sight.
Yet do not keep a meticulously engineered dopamine machine within arm's reach while you're trying to do something difficult.
Step 5 involves using a short timed start. Do not promise yourself that you will finish the entire project. Commit to working for just 10 minutes.
Because procrastination is primarily an issue of task initiation.
Right. Once the task is started, the anxiety often dissipates entirely, and continuation becomes significantly easier. The dread of the task is almost always worse than the task itself.
Step 6 is to add movement, sleep consistency, and accountability where supported by the evidence. Build that baseline of physical resilience. Protect your sleep so your executive function has the actual biological fuel it needs to operate.
Finally, step 7. Seek professional assessment when chronic delay is entangled with severe depression, anxiety, ADHD, major sleep problems, or significant life impairment.
It's so important to recognize that.
It is. If your avoidance is threatening your livelihood or destroying your mental health, chronic delay is a signal to seek clinical support, not a sign that you just need to try harder.
It is about recognizing when the structural or neurobiological load is simply too heavy to lift alone. There is no shame in getting the right tools for the job.
None at all.
Well, that's Brain Candy from Clan Horatio. For the companion Debate Candy episode, news briefings, and classic audiobooks, visit clarinhoratio.com.
I want to leave you with a final provocative question to mull over as you face whatever task you might be putting off today. When you postpone a task, are you failing your future self, or is your present self trying badly to tell you something important?